Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for some coffee and conversation. We're super glad to have you here, and we're going to jump into the conversation part because hopefully you've been sipping on that coffee. So one of the things I just want to make sure that you are aware is that we really, really value your input into the discussion today. So this is intended to be a conversation. It's not only with the panelists that you see on screen, but with you as well. So please, in the right-hand corner of your screen, there's a question and answer section. We really invite you to please use this. Go ahead and chat with us and throw questions that you might have bubbling up, and we'll bring them up in the conversation as appropriate. So we certainly encourage you to do that. If this is your first time attending one of our webinars, this is going to be a discussion in about 90 minutes in length. It's really just a chat and where we talk about best practices and learnings that our panelists have had that help to bring great ideas to life in the attractions community. And obviously a key part of that is conversation from you. There are times that we have some press or public viewing. If there are any members of the press, we'd love to invite you to just drop your name and publication into the question and answer, and we want to say hi. So this is going to, these have been going on now for several weeks, and they're basically just a bi-weekly gathering of attraction industry experts where we talk about what's going on right now and how do we position ourselves for success. So we've hosted a bunch of different topics. What you see on the screen there is kind of a quick image of what those have been. If you want more information about these kind of discussions, if you just kind of stumbled upon us, you can always go to gatewayticketing.com/community. There you'll find all the latest information and ways that you can be involved with a lot of this attraction content that we're making available. So next week, on September 16th, we'll be having a special zoo and aquarium discussion. I think that's also the same week as the AZA conference. So we're super excited to be focusing on zoos and aquariums during that time. So please jump over there. And just to introduce myself, I'm Matthew Hohenstein. I'm one of the principals here at Gateway Ticketing Systems. My other colleague in the principal arena, Mr. Randy Jocelyn, is also going to be helping to lead the panel. And joining us from Palace Entertainment is Mr. Grant Rozich, who is a returning panelist. So we're super glad to have him back as well. And we'll hear from him a little bit more in a moment.
Awesome. And we also have Felica Lindquist joining us from Las Vegas. Felica is the Senior Director of Public Operations and Guest Experience at the Mob Museum, the National Museum of Organized Crime and Law Enforcement. An awesome place. Felica is a hospitality professional and has also worked at some hotels and resorts and casinos. So it's going to be great to hear from Felica as she shares what the journey's been like over in Las Vegas. Behind the scenes, we've got our man with the plan, Bill D'Angelo. Bill's going to be working the chats and the Q&A. If you have any questions that he can answer, he's going to do his best to answer them. He'll also chime in when necessary. Any technical issues, we'll pass it over to Bill. So hi, Bill. Hi, everybody. All right. So Matthew, why don't you share a little bit about what we've been talking about the last couple webinars?
Yeah. So as we get ready for the conversation that we're going to have today, we kind of just wanted to take a moment and look back on some of the questions and the data that you as participants in these webinars have shared. So about 2 weeks ago, we kind of asked, hey, where's everybody at in their reopening stage? And so at this point, probably about 79% of those folks are in a situation where their attraction is open. And about 21% of folks maybe are still kind of preparing for reopening. Many of those are probably attractions that are located in California, where the epidemic or the pandemic has been a little bit more severe, and maybe they haven't been able to get to the stage of reopening just yet. So I think if you had asked any of us several months ago, we would have assumed that everybody would reopen by this time. This certainly has proven to be a little bit of a more drawn out situation, but I think that from a community, we've done a really good job of staying together with everyone and working through these challenges. And I think one of the things we'll get into with Grant and Felicia is some of the ways that folks were able to do that as well. Obviously, throughout all of that, there's been decisions that have had to be made that have never been made before, or it's really dusting off the old playbook of how do we run the attraction, because now all of the rules are different. So 2 weeks ago, these were one of the things that a lot of folks were having to share is that they've had to really focus on staffing. Obviously, as we're bringing in less revenue and things like that, we've had to react from a staffing standpoint to make sure that our costs are in line with that, as well as maybe because that's the amount of staff that we need to operate at the capacity levels that we're at. So we certainly understand that there's a host of decisions that have been made, specifically even outside these seven different groups. Some of the challenges and some of the folks that have been some of the decisions that have been being made has been focusing on masks, right? And what areas they need to keep closed and stuff like that. So one of the things I'd want to encourage everyone to please participate in is the Q&A again here. So as we're having discussions, we'd like to ask you to drop a question in there. If there's maybe been a specific decision that you've been really struggling with of late, go ahead and drop that into the question and answer, and we'll kind of get some ideas from the group on that. What's exciting, though, is some of the decisions that folks have been having to make is, do they introduce new activities into their attractions at a time where maybe we think that, hey, we're really having to cut back, we're having to minimize things. It's also been an opportunity for us to look at doing things anew, and what is a different way of operating or a different way to bring an experience to life. Operating hours and making changes like that have also been a lot of important decisions that have been made. So to kind of see what other things have been playing out, Randy, do we want to jump into the
update? I apologize. I was bouncing around on the slides back and forth, and I didn't mean to do that, but yeah, so there's been so much information that everyone's been sharing. I just wanted to keep these up a little bit here for everybody to kind of see. And because we've got two great folks that are going to share a little bit about their journey, I thought it was really interesting to see and hear what everyone's concerns are. And there's been a couple points in there, and Marjorie in our Q&A, I'm not sure where they're located, but they never actually closed. So it is interesting that here we've got a multitude of attractions that have opened or not opened or couldn't open and stayed open. So, Marjorie's Washington State Ferries. Oh, I know that. Hey, Marjorie. Yeah, well, obviously, Washington State Ferries, you guys also offer a critical commerce path for people coming in and out of areas. So it is interesting to hear certain businesses that are essential businesses that do stay open. I do have a couple updates though I wanted to share with everybody, specifically California. I'm a Southern California native. There was a lot of buzz and information last week. Last week was a week where people were really expecting to hear some really, I think, positive news about reopening. And actually, California and Governor Newsom really outlined a pretty stringent reopening plan. Basically, every county was assigned a color, and you could see most of them have what they've classified as like a purple or widespread classification. I think some of the challenges here in California, if they're taking the lead on this, if we're watching, some of the big challenges are, in order to move, I think it's something like 14 or up to 21 days of consistency before you can move to the next phase. And then the other aspect here that's pretty difficult is that a lot of these counties, and if you go to this website, you can actually roll over each of the counties. You'll see that almost all of the counties have met one of the criteria, but there's two criteria. There's the positive tests and then the new cases. So the new cases is a rate based on per 100,000. So you can see if you have over 7 new cases per 100,000 people on the day, you're going to be put into that county risk level of widespread. But on the other side, really the positivity rate really depends on how many tests you're actually giving or how many tests people are taking. So you'll see when you go through this that some of these counties actually are doing really, really well, but they just might not be testing as many people. So there's a bit of an unknown. So anyone from California, please chime in and share. You will notice at the very bottom of the California map, there's this little, reddish, that's San Diego County. And interestingly, San Diego actually is in the that reddish phase. And that allows them to reopen a lot of locations that are outdoor or with limited capacities and some indoors. So it's 25% capacity. And not surprising, we started to see some announcements. Interesting, I do want to mention here is that San Diego is actually talking about that if you do reopen, if you're a business that reopens, you have to mandate guest registration. You have to track phone numbers and emails, and you have to actually produce information for contact tracing. I don't have any information about how they're going to communicate with folks. Is that on the customer side? Do you have to communicate? Do you have to share it with the county? I didn't really go into full details about that, but they are mandating that in San Diego County. And then over in San Diego, you could see also in San Diego, but at SeaWorld, they have kind of taken the lead. We talked 2 weeks ago about the event at Knott's Berry Farm. Obviously, there's been a lot of success with these festivals and meal experiences. So San Diego SeaWorld is really launching some really cool stuff, which they're calling Zoo Days. So they've really embraced the husbandry aspect of their business. Zoo Days is an event with beer and with alcohol and food. It's a really cool looking event. I would love to go, but they also have some really neat things for kids. So you can see that they've got the Sesame Street meet and greets. They've got all the outdoor shopping and outdoor areas open. They've got the live music and some animal presentations. So they're really embracing this kind of festival idea. Let's get out, let's have a good time, and let's experience SeaWorld. So that just, I believe, opened just last weekend. I don't have any information about how it went yet, but it looks like a pretty cool festival to attend.
That's great. Over on the other coast, so in Virginia, we've got Busch Gardens Williamsburg that recently had announced that they'll be reopening. So some of you that are wondering, hey, why is this such a big deal or whatnot, and it really came out of the state requirements that were given to venues like Busch Gardens on what they could do to open. And really that rule was, hey, you can open at 50% of capacity or a maximum of 1,000 people. When you think of a park like Busch Gardens Williamsburg, 1,000 people could easily be absorbed into, a quarter of the park, most likely, or even a tenth. So when that originally had coming out, thinking about operating a park that large at such a limited capacity, I think was really challenging for them. What's exciting though is, starting today, they found a way to open and doing this kind of taste of Busch Gardens. So the admission tickets are $44.99. Food and beverage can be purchased then in addition to that, or you can bundle food plus a tasting card for $68.99. So there's a really innovative to open the park in a way that is profitable. And one of the other things I think, and we had talked about this, probably a few months back, was, potentially having multiple park operations during a given day. So there's a morning set of 1,000 folks that can come in, or an earlier in the day session. And then another 1,000 portion coming in later in the day. So it allows them to ensure that, one, they're in compliance with the regulations, but also still able to maximize as much as possible. Over in at Epcot here in my hometown of Orlando, Florida, they're celebrating the 25th anniversary or 25th year of the Epcot International Food and Wine Festival. doing it a little bit differently. So there's kind of a hybrid of events, blending together maybe things that would have happened during the Flower and Garden Festival together with things of the food and wine. So being a little bit different, but still bringing to life those key events and those key revenue generators that we're known for.
Hey, Matthew, being in Orlando, have you been able to visit any of these attractions? I mean, I'm not sure if you have a pass for Disney or not, but have you gone to any of these events?
So I would have told you if you'd asked me that in April, I would have said, you know what, it's probably just around the corner. I'm looking forward to doing that in May. Unfortunately, in Florida, we had quite a uptick of coronavirus cases. And so personally, I made the choice of, you know what, I'm probably going to just remain hunkered down. I kind of looked at it as, hey, this is probably the worst it's been in the area that I live, and I probably should be behaving as if it is the worst. And so personally, I made that decision. It's great that other folks have had the confidence and the ability to go out, and we've seen the parks in Orlando being able to operate. I do think that there's probably a fair amount of folks that kind of sit in my boat. We've seen some of the attractions maybe struggling a little bit with getting the attendance that they would expect. Despite the fact that we need to operate at lower levels of capacity, parks like Universal Orlando have not had to implement like reservation systems at all. And really the only parks that they've actually had to close and not allowed folks into has been their water theme park, Volcano Bay. So I think that we're still trying to, and I think I'm looking forward to, so 2 days ago, we actually had our lowest case count ever since June or May. So it's been really exciting that finally our testing is starting to show lower positivity. I think we're around the 5% range right now. So I think that we're going to start seeing attractions being able to absorb all of this pent up demand. And I think the attractions in Orlando have also done a really, really good job of being models for safe operations. So, despite us being in this, worst time ever, we haven't had any situations where, coronavirus outbreaks have been traced back to the theme parks or anything like that. So that's been really, really positive. And I think that that's plays out in how the parks have done. In the Disney parks, there's probably a little bit of challenge, or they're limiting attendance into the parks, but they're also trying to balance the various constituents that could visit there. So if you look right now, pretty much they have 3 categories of visitors: folks that stay at their hotels, folks that only buy tickets, and folks that have annual passes. And right now, going into Labor Day weekend, all 4 of the parks are completely booked for all 3 of those classes. However, when you start, looking at other days, annual pass holders right now have some limited availability at almost all of the parks throughout the entire month of September, versus there's still openings for resort guests at most of the parks and theme park ticket guests at most of the parks. So it's really interesting to kind of see how they've had to apply kind of somewhat of a revenue management module to how they allow folks into the park, given that they only have a limited amount of attendance. Obviously, annual pass holders are a really key part of the group, but there's also a little bit higher profitability that's probably coming from resort guests due to the on-site stay and all the ancillary spend. So that's my 2-second update there on Florida.
Well, I think we had told everybody that this is like a coffee and a COVID conversation, so I think that's fair. I want to make sure that we're allowing for questions to come in and talking about regions. One of the things that just struck me, I'm looking at all the pictures of everybody. So I'm in Tennessee, and Grant, you're in Pennsylvania, right?
Correct. Yep.
So we have Felicia from Las Vegas, and then Matthew, you're in Florida. Bill and Greg are also in parts of PA. So we're actually pretty representative of a lot of different regions that are operating very differently, and so I think it's an interesting point. I want to pause for a moment about the strategy about the festivals, because one of the things that you were just talking about, Matthew, we're going to kind of go off script a little bit, but it's this idea of pre-purchasing your experiences and getting your food purchasing in. So the Taste of Busch Gardens, it's an extra $30. We also know we've seen that kind of everywhere. The idea of being able to like capture that, you have to buy it ahead of time. That helps build that revenue model that it's guaranteed extra revenue for that group of people that's coming in. So it's just a smart way. It's probably the only way to really pre-purchase, because I know that a lot of folks, they're having labor shortages as well. They're having to cut labor in certain areas. You might not have as many windows open to sell these types of food experiences. Grant and Felicia, are you guys doing similar things of trying to pre-purchase and pre-experience and bundle the experience ahead of time?
To an extent. I mean, we offer meal deals online and things like that to try to get those pre-purchases in so you can get people into the park. But it wasn't too big of a push on our side, but it was something that we were doing or offering other experiences that are kind of unique or a little different. Kennywood has a paint, the paint nights. They have a paint night during the day, basically, that you can go and kind of sit there. It's more for season pass holders than ticket holders, just to get them in the park and to enjoy the facility. So there's some things that we're doing, but it's not a huge push to do festivals or anything like that. It's just trying to get people to enjoy the environment.
And Felicia, you guys have a lot going on at the Mob Museum. There's a lot of experience there.
Right, yeah. So, and I know you guys have been working with us on switching to time ticketing, so we had never done time ticketing before. And we are making a big push for people to pre-book their tickets and experiences, mostly for capacity reasons. But so one thing that we have noticed is that we are selling the same ticket types as we had before we shut down, but we have seen an uptick in capture rates. So there is an interest out there for folks to add on experiences and add on whatever your additional offerings are and spend that money, which has been pretty exciting for us.
Are you seeing the capacity constraints that we heard about at some of these locations? Meaning that and I guess Grant, you're going to have to look at this across multiple attractions. We'll talk about Palace a bit, but are you guys mandated to have like a cap, like Matthew mentioned? What's your cap, Felicia?
So the governor cap is 50% of capacity for the building. But with our own protocols that we put in place and trying to social distance groups, we actually set it up to where our capacity is even lower than that. So there's a whole process, and I know we have some photos and stuff that we can share later, but how the guest moves through the queue line and how the guest gets into the building prevents us from really hitting that 50% at any given time. But we've also done some tricks on the ticketing side to limit. So we're encouraging people to purchase online, but we're also limiting because we know that we're not quite where we want to be in terms of training our visitors to purchase in advance. So we hold a subset of tickets on our side for the walk-up guests so we don't have to turn them away.
Yeah, I think that's probably a different model than, you're in Las Vegas and you probably have, as Las Vegas, even though that, tourism is down, it's still a strong component of the experience would be tourists. But I think, Grant, you're probably, some of your attractions, like you mentioned, you're catering a lot more towards your season pass base and bringing them in. And are they having to make reservations, or your capacity controlled in that same way that some of the other attractions are?
Yeah, it's very similar to what Felicia was talking about it, but it depends on where the attraction is. Is it in Pennsylvania? Is it Connecticut? Is it New Hampshire, Wisconsin? They all kind of have a little bit different rules. So we do have a capacity limit at all the parks that was enforced, and most of it is 50%. But just like the Mom Museum, we ended up lowering that even further with our own protocols and making sure that we had social distancing and that we were able to manage the crowds effectively. And with our time ticketing, when this all happened, 4, 5, 6 months ago, I don't even know, is it September yet? When it all first happened, we added all of these protocols, all these controls in because we weren't sure what was going to happen. So everything had to be done with reservations. All of our ticketing was time ticketing, which it still is. All our season pass holders had to make a reservation before they came to the park. And what we found is that the reservations work really well for the people buying tickets. but not so well for the season pass holders. A lot of people with their season passes will decide, hey, let's go to the park this afternoon, or let's go later tonight just to stop by. So that model really wasn't working. So what we found is if we removed the reservation requirement for our season pass holders, that they were able to enjoy the park and come and go as they please. And we never really hit our capacity numbers with them. But same thing that the Mod Museum was experiencing too. We originally said all of our tickets are going to have to be sold online so we can manage the capacity, so we know who's coming for the day. And we're not going to sell any in the park. Well, that doesn't really work because people show up, grandma shows up, kids show up, there's an extra friend there, you got to buy a ticket. So we started moving a little bit of that capacity to the in-park sales, and then still having the capacity of our online sales. And then again, setting aside a capacity for our season pass holders. So we learned a lot in the first couple of weeks of having our reservation system and figuring out how we were going to get guests into the parks and how we were going to maintain our capacity limits effectively. So, we started off with a very stringent model of how we were going to do it, and then we ended up modifying it as we went, as we learned. Okay, season pass holders don't really like the reservation system. They will make reservations, but if we take the reservation system away, we'll see 50% more season pass holders show up. And if we set aside 2,000 visits or 2,000 spaces for those season pass holders, they'll fluctuate in that space, and they'll never really hit their maximum. So those are a lot of a learning experience for us. And then the flip side of it too, with the reservations, it was kind of a silver lining in the whole process was we were able to effectively staff the parks more efficiently. So if we knew that less people were coming one day, we could lower the staff. We didn't have to sit there and say, well, based on the weather, based on what we've seen in past seasons, this is what we think the crowd's going to look like today. We knew, we had 5,000 people sign up. And if we had people buy their time ticket, those people showed up. The drop-off rate was very small on folks who bought a time ticket who didn't end up coming for a particular day. So, we kind of gauged it a little bit and figured out what was going to be the best option for each facility. And now we're taking what we've learned from here in the States, and we have a park that's going to be opening in Australia in a few weeks, and kind of molded what we've learned into that environment as well.
That's great, Grant. It's funny you bring up staffing. That's one of the next things that we kind of just wanted to talk about a little bit was, I think a few weeks ago we had talked about, actually last week, our last webinar, we had talked about a lot of folks were having to decrease staffing. So it was somewhat interesting whenever we see stuff like this coming out from Cedar Fair, where, hey, there's actually a lot of jobs that they're looking to fill, specifically in preparation for their Tricks and Treats Fall Fest. And they've really done some interesting things here and are having to kind of react and be really attractive in the recruitment space. Fall positions are starting at $9 an hour with a special $2 per hour premium pay incentive. $1 of that is, they're also paying an additional premium after the employment contract, with really that goal of trying to make sure that they can fill the need for staffing that probably was historically filled with international programs and others recruitment initiatives that we're bringing labor into the market that are just not there at a time when a lot of our maybe high school kids and things like that are not available to work because they're in school. Felicia, have there been any challenges with staffing at the Mob Museum? Has it been tough in that you've had to pull back on staff, or has it been difficult even to bring certain staff in because maybe they have a reluctance to come back into the workplace?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. So we've retained just about everybody. We've always run pretty lean at the museum, so we haven't had an issue where we have this mass amount of folks that we can't get on the schedule. But we do have some individuals who have elected to sit on the bench for now until they feel more comfortable. So there is a subset of those individuals. And then one of the challenges I would say that we've had, and we've started kind of pushing back how early we publish the schedule, is with exposure, right? So you have staff that are in your building every day and they go home, or they're doing whatever they do on their off time, and then they may or may not get exposed to someone. And we have a whole contact tracking system in place at the museum that can sit people out for some time. So there has been a lot of juggling on the schedule for those kinds of things. We've been very fortunate not to have cases and things like that in the building, but kind of monitoring everyone's health and their comfort level has been challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, so something that we're not used to in our normal operation. All of a sudden, having to play medical rescheduler with all of those things coming on. That's very interesting. I think one of the other items that I had run across was American Dream, the large kind of mixed-use mall in New Jersey is just reopened this week, and one of their leaders had kind of really put a focus on digital assets as they started to prepare for reopening. And I thought there was kind of two elements of that was pretty interesting. One was making sure that as they reopened, that they had a mobile application that was able to solve some of the challenges that they were thinking they were going to experience. How do I, make tickets available to, the theme park in a way that minimizes contact and makes it easy to redeem? As well as then how do I make sure that all of this staff is prepared with things that they'd never had to worry about before, and that was leveraging an e-learning platform. So I think that this was a good time, unfortunately, to really beef up operations when it comes to our digital assets because of the rate of return on those and the ease for kind of adapting those to what we don't know that tomorrow is going to look like, right? So if we need to all of a sudden change kind of some of the messaging around something, it's very simple to throw that into the mobile app. Grant, have y'all focused on kind of using your digital assets in a different way since coming back from the pandemic?
We have, training was one of the top things that we needed to get done as soon as we made the decision to open a park. And, you have hundreds of staff that you need to get trained. So we used a lot of online platforms to do that. Some of the parks use different ones, but we utilize that for all the staff members to kind of get some of the mundane things out of the way that we normally have to go through. So then we can focus on the new cleaning procedures, the new procedures for handling guests in different environments and those sorts of things. So we definitely utilized it a lot more than we had in the past, simply because we had such a trunk. And I feel like a lot of attractions had the same restrictions that we did, where we made the decision to open and it was, okay, we're going to open in 3 weeks. So we got to cram all of the stuff that we normally get done with our team members in a much smaller period of time. So using an online platform was a huge benefit to a lot of our facilities, just to get that stuff out of the way.
Yeah, and I'm reading a comment here in our Q&A from Michelle, who says that at her attraction they have they're short on staff that is actually able and willing to work. So maybe a lot of people are sitting on the bench, but then you also have a hiring freeze going on. So the attraction is not able or willing to bring on new folks. And so you really have a lot there's a lot of hours at stake. And I've seen this in our home. My kids are working and there's just a lot of people are not available. So they're constantly asking to work. And I think we've talked about this before, but this is a time when attractions really need to be mindful of the health of their individuals that are working for them, their employees, because it's easy to get tired. Just wearing a mask all day is very tiring, and really looking at it, the HR aspects, it's a difficult time to be at work if you're one of the few that is working consistently. Are you guys doing anything for that special core group? Are you changing your? Well, I'll just ask it this way: what are you doing differently now to take care of your employee health at your attractions?
So, there's a ton of different things, depending on, again, what attraction and where the location is. So we saw a whole host of hiring issues, from whether we didn't have enough hours because we weren't at the capacity that we normally would be to have all of our staff work all the time, which is kind of a nice problem to have, that we had an abundance of staff. And then we had other locations where we didn't have enough staff to get the attraction up and running. We rely heavily a lot on our destination locations on J1 visas. So those kids weren't being able to come in to work. Some of our older staff, especially our ticket takers, our folks who work in guest relations, didn't feel comfortable coming back in. So we had a little bit of a deficit there as well. And for our parks that rely heavily on J1s, I mean, we had it was a struggle to get people in. You go to the Wisconsin Dells, where you have a city of maybe 5,000 people that are supplying parks that see hundreds of thousands of guests. So it's a very limited supply of employees. Or in New Hampshire, it's the same thing. We have a park out there that's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and it's in the middle of a resort town or resort area. So they didn't have the team members as well. But one of the interesting things that they did, they kind of thought outside the box. So one of the things we did as a company to try to limit interactions and touch points was we got rid of all of our meet and greets, our shows that we did for the guests. So the park in New Hampshire was kind of smart. They thought outside the box, and they said, wait a minute, we have all of these actors that don't have jobs right now. We should invite them to become team members. So that's what they did. They ended up stocking their entire park with team members from our entertainment provider. So that was kind of a cool thing. But to go on what we do for the team members to try to accommodate them and make sure that we're keeping them healthy as well. We do the temperature checks that everyone does. Everyone wears masks. But we also limited our operations. So the days were shortened. We closed most of our facilities at around 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock for the larger ones. And then we also didn't operate 7 days a week. So we operated 6 days a week, or in some cases 5 days a week, just to give them a break on those team members that we're really relying upon to operate the facility, keep the guests safe. So there's a bunch of give and take there that we had to make decisions. And one of our parks, we made the decision to close it. We had 2 positive tests out of a team of 500 people, and we said, all right, we're not going to run the risk of having anyone else get infected or infecting our guests or infecting the community. So we made the decision to close the park for the rest of the season. And they were doing really well, but you got to be good corporate citizens in those cases and make decisions that are smart for your staff and also the community. So it really just depends on the area, but we really looked at how's this affecting our team members. They're out in the sun wearing masks for extended periods of time. How can we give them extra breaks? How can we make sure that they're not getting exhausted and wearing themselves out as well? So I don't know if anyone else has a comment on that, but that's kind of what we did as a company. We made the decision to sort of pull back a little bit to make sure that our team members were taken care of as well.
I think one of the things that struck me when Michelle's from Mount Vernon who asked that question, and I was just thinking, you're in Virginia and it's hot, it's humid, it's probably really difficult. They probably have a lot of docents that need a lot of knowledge of the historic house and the grounds. So it is probably really difficult to find the right staff, and then that staff. A lot of docents and volunteers in the museum space are more senior, and so they're probably more likely to not, participate. Michelle and Felicia, do you guys have docents as well at your museum? And is that an area where you've seen a little bit more difficulty in working with some of your team members to come in and stay employed or volunteering?
Well, I mean, similar to what Grant was saying, we've done a shuffle of staff. So I think there is less of an interest in that face-to-face interaction with docents and staff members. So we have a team of educators, and visitors are less inclined to stand and have a conversation with them at this point anyway. So we've done some cross-training with those folks to get in on other areas of the museum, like Grant mentioned, the guest services core areas. I would also say, I totally empathize with Michelle. We have a team of private events folks. And of course, we're really limited in our private event sales right now. So a lot of those individuals have come on board on the guest services side, and we're just kind of shuffling folks around. We'll get into it later, but we also have a new hand sanitizer operation. So some of the individuals who aren't comfortable working on the floors with guests are in a back room, making and bottling hand sanitizer. So there's been ways to engage folks and move them around and do some cross training that has also proven to boost morale too. So.
Felicia, has because of that desire of not necessarily wanting to talk with someone and get the information from them, have you changed the way that you're delivering that information? Has it affected the exhibits or anything like that yet, or are there plans to?
So we are revamping our audio tour as a way for folks to get additional information. We have a mobile app that we try to encourage folks to use, but it hasn't changed drastically at the moment. Things that we're doing, we have a lot of interactives on site, and I think someone had mentioned in the Q&A that they have interactive tables and things like that. I shouldn't say interactive because it's a dirty word right now, but the things that people are touching in the exhibit spaces, we've come up with creative solutions for that. So it's like a wave to start or something like that, or we're handing out stylus, or we're using finger sleeves so that guests can still touch these things. So it's really the questions that staff have of the educators, the docents, whatever you want to call them, that maybe they're asking toward the end of their visit if they bump into a staff member, but we're not doing the face-to-face interaction like we used to.
I see.
I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about like embracing like COVID and embracing the experience. And I think you've done some really smart things as well, Felicia, about this. But this is actually in Las Vegas at Bally's, and I'm sure all of us have seen Body Worlds and we've gone to this exhibit, but to really embrace like what COVID is and use that to enhance the experience, I think is really smart. It's even as simple as putting masks on some of the exhibit pieces. But I'm wondering, if you guys, what your take is on this. So like, Felicia, you're in Las Vegas. Do you know people that have gone to this experience? You might have seen it already. Do you know anybody at Bally's or anything that, I think you did work at some casinos, or I think the Four Seasons, and you've worked also at which Bellagio, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, being in Las Vegas as a local, are these types of things working? Are people going in? Do you know people that have maybe visited this?
Gosh, I don't know anyone who has been to the Bodies at Bally's yet. Bally's opened relatively recently. So we're still in sort of this rolling opening of casinos, and there are a number of them that have not yet reopened. But no, I haven't seen this yet, and I haven't heard from anyone who's done this. I imagine they're getting some folks because it's really limited here in terms of, there's no shows, there's no nightclubs. There's no live music, concerts, those kinds of things. So this is one of the few things that you can do in Las Vegas right now besides gamble.
Okay, so I think that's important. Thank you for filling us in, because I actually am not aware of what's happening. So the Vegas update is so the Mob Museum is in Las Vegas. You guys are kind of near the northern end of the Strip, or the original Strip. Is that right? Fremont?
Yeah, downtown Fremont Street area. Yeah. Okay,
so by the way, I visited, and this place is awesome. I mean, I cannot recommend it enough. I love the museum. But so in Las Vegas right now, casinos are rolling open. Some of them are open. Is that what I heard you say?
That's correct. Yeah. So MGM, for instance, opened maybe a handful of their casinos in the beginning. They just opened the Mirage last week. And then there's still 2 or 3 of their properties that are closed with no reopening dates yet. They also laid off 18,000 people this week officially. So it's pretty rough here. We're hoping for a good Labor Day weekend, but it's very much a weekend business right now. And then the weekdays are pretty slow.
Well, areas like Fremont, which is outdoor, but it's covered. Is that area open? Can you go to Fremont Street and walk around?
You can, yeah. They're counting, so they have capacity limitations there too. They can't do their live concerts, which always brought a lot of folks down there. And they do have a mask mandate in that area, even though it's outdoors too. So I know we've talked about outside wearing masks. Those guests also have masks.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give everybody a little bit of information about the Mob Museum and let you share, but I think you guys did open up pretty early. When were you able to open the museum?
May 31st.
May 31st. So for that, comparative to a lot of our attractions, you guys were able to open earlier than some places. I loved what Jonathan sent out. Jonathan is your CEO and president. I felt that his approach was really smart. And I shared this on some webinars previously, but you have some great information on your website. I really like the safety protocols. I think that this has evolved as well because let me advance my slide here. Sorry, everybody. You guys put out a safety protocol. You can download it. It's a PDF. It has all this information. I definitely encourage everybody to do this. It's just a great way to build comfort and confidence and to share everything that you guys are doing. I thought that was really great. And we've talked about that as well. How's the reception been? I mean, are people coming in talking about your protocols, and are they reading it ahead of time?
I don't get the sense that they're all reading it ahead of time, but it was important to us that we had it out there in the world. We took some of our cues from the hotels around us. The Wynn was a big leader here in Las Vegas in getting stuff out early and kind of creating a model for what we wanted to put out there to the world, what Vegas was doing to make it comfortable for folks. Behind this document is a 30-page document that the staff used. So there's an extensive protocol listing. And I know Grant talked about training for his folks. We did on-site training in small groups for days and days and days to make sure that everybody was ready with the main changes. So we did building walkthroughs and talked about all of the new protocols that were going to be in place based on this document and based on the 30-page Bible.
So Felicia, I look at this and see it as, just really good social responsibility, like really good ways of in creating trust. Do you see some communications or sharing procedures like this in a non-COVID world? Do you think that this changes your operation at all? And that, hey, we think that moving forward, we'd always have something like this available. Has there been any thought about that yet?
I don't know if we've talked about it. I mean, it's possible. I think we'd want to know what it is that our guests or visitors are curious about, or what they would want to know about, but I don't think we'd be adverse to sharing information.
Yeah, you mentioned the Wynn, and I was really, really impressed by kind of what they had put out. I looked at it as like, okay, hey, we're being transparent in that nobody's ever lived through this, right? The Spanish flu was quite a while ago, and unfortunately those folks are not around anymore to advise us on this. But we're going to make our best efforts, and we're going to clearly communicate everything that we're doing so that you have all of the information versus rolling the dice and just guessing at what's happening. So right. I applaud y'all for this, as well as the Vegas community on what they've done.
Yeah, I think, and one of the benefits to this too is that nobody's lived through this, so all of us as staff members were also prospective guests. So what is it that we're concerned about? What do we want to know? Like, if we were going to visit the Mob Museum, what would we want to see there? So that was beneficial in the exercise of creating this, is that we all had our own concerns and questions.
This was probably one of the opportunities where you were able to do that much more naturally, but something that we encourage at all times, right? Whenever you're thinking of your attraction, what am I going to experience this as a guest standpoint? Here, obviously, this was the first time that everybody had been dealing with that, but it's probably also another thing that we can take into the non-pandemic world of like, let's make sure that we're thinking about this from the guest standpoint, and what would we need to know had we not been working here and understanding every intimate detail of this for the last X years.
Right.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it's one of the benefits is it's forced all of us to back up and say, let's look at the guest journey again, right? Let's look at, normally a bunch of people just show up at the steps and they're crowded and they're waiting outside, and Felicia, you've got a smaller entryway, and in fact, I'll jump to, we'll go back to the some of the cool things you're doing, but you guys have going back here. I mean, the building is it's a original courthouse, but also a post office. Is that what it was?
Right. Yeah. So post office in the lobby and courthouse on the second floor were historic buildings, so we can't make significant structural changes to accommodate all of these new protocols. So I shared some photos with Randy, but this is our lobby area currently. You'll see it's hard to tell on the left photo, but all of the windows now have plexi behind them. And we've added these microphones back in so that the guests can hear the agents better. Previously, there was an interaction through the window. They could reach out and help wristband folks. We don't do any of that anymore, but the staff feel more comfortable, the guests feel more comfortable with this barrier in between. We have 5 stations where we could sell tickets. We're only operating 2 to 3 to make sure that there's distancing between the staff and the guests. So it's a much sort of slower process in the box office, kind of to match our capacity limitations too. And then the queue there by the elevator on the right side that has the social distancing dots. So we're very stringent on how many parties we can have in the lobby at any given time.
Yeah, but the building itself, I mean, like you said, it's historical, so you can't change it. But I love, like, you got the old post office, but yeah, educating the guests on what their arrival is going to look like is really important, because you don't want people to congregate in an area. In fact, we had, I think it was months ago, we had the Titanic Museum on, and one of the things that they actually, it wasn't the Titanic Museum, it was, well, we were talking to them and an FEC, and they were saying, well, we had socially distanced all these people outside, but that meant that they couldn't be in the lobby, but then it rained. So like they had to think differently, like, oh, what does it look like? And then the Titanic Museum had a similar experience where they were queuing people up, but what they did is they just let people sit in their cars, and they used like a pager system, like you might go to a restaurant. So we're just having to rethink, what does it look like? If I'm a guest and I'm waiting because of your capacity controls, where am I waiting? Who am I waiting next to? How spaced am I out? What is the museum doing to protect me from another set of guests? So it is really interesting. So do you have anybody working the door to prevent them from coming into the lobby as well?
It's not so much prevention. So we're on the time ticketing, and we've planned accordingly to welcome the right number, or a manageable number of guests at any given time. We have a security guard out front who opens the door for folks. We have 1, 2, 3 staff members in the lobby. So we're actually more heavily staffing the lobby than we were before, because there's so much instruction involved in where you go now and then what and those kinds of things. But if you move, I think on the next slide, Randy, we had the sort of the queuing space.
Is that, hold on one second, this one right here?
Not that one.
Well, I got a bunch of great slides from you. So let's see. I might not have included it in here. I love this slide. I don't.
Yeah.
Is this the one? I gotta say, like, I think, is that Al Capone over there in the back? I mean,
it is. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Just absolutely brilliant. Really good marketing, real smart. So what
we did our own custom floor stickers down there too. They say wise guys keep their distance. So that was sort of the campaign that we ran, as well as like protect the family and those kinds of things. So yeah, that was fun for us. But
protect the family as your mask campaign. It's this is a temperature check area, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So this is our we commandeered half of the retail store footprint. Because we didn't have anywhere else to go. And, to your point, Randy, like it's 112 degrees outside. We can't have the guests waiting outside. We don't want them waiting in their cars. They don't all come in a car. So we have to bring them into the building and keep them comfortable. There, early on when we were first exploring this temperature check thing, we were also concerned if people wait outside, like what temperature will they register when they finally do come inside? So we needed to make sure that we're cooling them down enough to take an appropriate temperature reading. But this is our wellness desk. Now we call it, used to be the retail cash wrap. We have staff members who are part of our original guest services team. They went through a training with a licensed medical practitioner to take accurate temperatures. We wanted to make sure that when the guests come in, they weren't seeing, a high school or college student saying, well, how confident can I feel in this? Like they all had appropriate training with the right individuals. We have face shields for them. They wear masks, they wear gloves, they have all the appropriate PPE. And the guests come in and they sort of file into this area. There's an exhibit on the other side of this space. So we wanted to make the queuing area interesting. We timed everything out on the dots. So a guest could spend up to 20 minutes moving through the wellness check area and into the main exhibit space. So we didn't want that to be a dead area. We created a whole new exhibit for this room. I think you have that on the next slide or one of the.
So Felicia, I had a quick question. So I obviously any pictures of an attraction, like I'm looking at all the details. I noticed the sink in the back. Is the sink like, was it, free with the spot, or did you bring that in special?
So we have a number of portable bars that we use for private events, but we don't really have that many private events now. So we took all of the portable sinks that go with the portable bars and placed them strategically around the building so that guests would have access to wash their hands in areas where they might not always have had access. This particular sink is for the wellness folks so that the guests feel, the staff are keeping themselves clean and sanitized in between guests and things like that so that they can feel more confident about it.
I mean, I love that. I mean, one, if I was an employee and I knew that I have this easy way that I can, I can clean and make sure that I feel I'm safe. I think from a guest standpoint, I think, yeah, I would buy or take my bars and put sinks around everywhere. I think that's a brilliant idea. And I noticed, so are you selling masks? I think Bill was asking about that. Are you all?
Yeah, so originally we ordered a bunch of masks because we were one of the only businesses in Las Vegas mandating masks. So this is before the Nevada mask mandate. Guests could go to the casino, stay in their hotel. They didn't have to wear a mask, but when they came to the museum, they would. So we had a lot of visitors who were not prepared for that. So these black masks with the logo, we were giving those out complimentary. It was part of an incentive too to come visit the museum. Now we are selling them. We also did a line of kind of fun. Yeah, those are them. We sold out of these really quick. One of the favorites was the one with the quote on it: "Never rat on your friends and always keep your mouth shut." So we're doing another run of these. But that's been really fun too for the guests to get involved with. If you're going to design masks for your organizations and your attractions, do some fun stuff, not just logos. The logos are cool, but this was really popular.
Yeah, I think it makes quite a talking piece, right? Like, I mean, it's going to encourage the discussion just because of the novelty of it. That's brilliant.
Yeah, those were really fun. And then we're selling the souvenir ones too, the black ones still.
I'm going to go through some of your other experiences here. I'm not sure if I have. I'm trying to. You sent me a lot of great pictures, but obviously,
this is the one that's opposite that wellness desk. So when you're walking into the space, this is the line that you're going into. You'll walk up that left side and you'll curve around, and there's a full exhibit there on the rise of the cartels. So this was kind of exciting for us too, because it was a hole in our exhibit narrative that we really did want to cover. And all of a sudden we had this entire space that we needed to do something with. So it fit perfectly. The first floor of the museum really focuses on contemporary topics and organized crime. So this is kind of the perfect ad. But we talk about narcos, we talk about popular culture, how representative or how accurate are these TV shows that we're watching on Netflix in terms of the historical narrative. So guests really like it. It's been fun.
Yeah, and obviously you can see that you've created this pathway by adding these elements here. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but you're adding these elements here in the middle, and then doing that walkway as you kind of journey around. Are people getting too close to the pieces? Like, are they touching them, or what do you see? How are you seeing how they're interacting?
No, I mean, we never really worry about that kind of stuff. So everything that should be protected is covered. If they ended up touching the exhibit, cases and stuff like that, it's fine. But we're more worried about guests getting on top of each other, right? So they're like, oh, that artifact over there is really cool. I want to go see that. And then all of a sudden they're right next to someone else's grandma. But we're not as big on, not sticklers about guests getting too close to the items. They're protected. That was really fun. The diorama there is the El Chapo escape. So that we had a couple years ago, but it depicts El Chapo's escape from prison. And there's a little motorcycle there.
That's really
a lot of the artifacts came from the actual agents. So Javier Pena and his partner, we borrowed stuff from them. The clothing items are theirs.
So speaking of cool items and stuff like that, I want to have a little fun for a moment. We have a lot of stuff of, I've been at your attraction and things. You have some cool pieces, but there's some stuff from Al Capone there. So we're having coffee, everybody, and I realize we all haven't shared our coffee mugs. I am enjoying coffee. This is an earlier morning. Felicia, you're joining us. You signed on at 7:30 this morning from Vegas. But we did that because there's some IAPA programming later today. So we wanted to make sure we were having fun and having a nice casual morning. So I do want to tell everybody, thank you for joining us. Grant, I think you have the most boring coffee mug this morning. I don't know if I'm going to have to call you out on that one.
Big gulp. I said we're opening Australia in a couple of weeks. I was on the phone late last night with them. So sometimes you have to trade style for functionality. So.
That's okay, but I think Felicia, Matthew, yours is pretty.
I think I'm the most boring. I mean, this is Target, stock coffee cup.
Well, I think it's down. I think we're down to Felicia versus me on the coolest cup because I got my Mr. Rogers and I've got great quotes. But Felicia, who's that?
That's my dog. His name's Ragnar.
Ragnar?
Yeah, he's fierce.
He's always awesome.
So, for those of us that are at home, I want to ask a trivia question. Something that I know, and it's a bit of a tie-in with something that you guys know, but we're talking to Al Capone. So that everybody, whoever answers first and gets this correctly first in the Q&A, we're gonna send you a little, gift card to go get some coffee on us. So. Get your fingers ready. Al Capone. He's a big deal. You have a couple displays about Al Capone. Is that right, Felicia, at the museum?
Yeah, that's correct.
So without giving too much away, and without using Google, so everybody at home, you can't use Google, or at work. What was Al Capone arrested for first? Like, what did he serve? What was his first prison time sentence for? Does anybody know? So if you want to participate, all you got to do is tax evasion. We got Lovey jumping out with tax evasion. I'm going to tell you that's not correct. So we got some more people.
We should play the Jeopardy song in the background.
That would be cool. Oh, Lovey, but you were fast, Lovey. That was good. It's first. What was he arrested for first? Michelle, concealing a deadly weapon. That is correct. In Philadelphia, Al Capone was first arrested and convicted for possession of a concealed weapon.
Lovey, don't feel bad. He got me on that one too.
Everybody thinks it's tax evasion. Now, our friends at the Eastern State Penitentiary, I believe that is actually where he went. So I don't know if anyone is from Eastern State Penitentiary is here, but I've also visited that attraction. You can go into the cell that Al Capone was in. It's really pretty freaky. But yes, but he was, speaking of weapons, you've got a little interesting tidbit about weapons. Felicia, can you share with us about Al Capone and a pistol or two?
Yeah. So we have Al Capone's revolver on display. It's on loan from the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit. We were very excited to get it. We worked with them on an exhibit about Al Capone and his tax evasion called the T-Men. When we unveiled the exhibit, it was very exciting. We did a lot of press over it. And a couple days into that display, we noticed or realized that the gun that we had on display was not the gun that we intended to have on display. So we did a quick exchange with the IRSCI and we got the right one out. So if you come to the museum now, you'll see the correct gun, but that was a fun adventure for us.
I think I've got there. So this is the gun that is on display there. Well, I mean, that's a pretty amazing piece of history to have that in at your attraction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really nice to have such a nice relationship with the IRSCI too.
And I think it's really interesting that there is an IRS-CI. I had no clue that they would have been the ones that would be holding that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they're the ones that got Al Capone on tax evasion, so they should get the credit for that.
Yep.
So we're gonna switch gears a little bit and share with our friend Grant here, Grant from Palace Entertainment. But before we do that, Grant, I think we have a couple more trivia questions. So I would love to. Do you now? I hit you up this morning and said, Grant, I need a trivia question. So you said I got a couple. So we're also going to do this here, and maybe do you want to share what's your trivia question?
Do you want to lead up to it? Do you want me to share it? It's up to you, Randy.
You got it. It's go for it. I don't even know the answers, so we're just you ask away and you tell us who's right.
Okay, so the first one is, what is the oldest continuing operating amusement park in the United States? Continuously operating amusement park in the United States. Let's see.
Okay, so this is for everybody. If you guys know it, you guys have to fill us in the Q&A.
Just play the music in the background.
Nice. Coney Island. We have Coney Island. We have Kennywood.
Nope, and nope.
They keep coming in. Mark Lacombe says Lake Compounds.
That is correct. It's on its 170 some year this year.
That is awesome. If you've so Lake Compounds is right. So Mark, we're going to make sure to reach out to you and get you a gift card. And by the way, thank you, Bill, for the applause in there. That's great. If you've ever been to Lake Compounds, just throw a yes in the thing, because I just want to see how many people have been to Lake Compounds. Now, Felicia, you're not from Connecticut. Lake Compounds in Connecticut. You grew up in the New York area. Did you ever go to Lake Compounds?
I didn't. The one that I recognized on the list, Grant, was Splish Splash.
Okay. Are you from Long Island?
Yeah, so I grew up in Queens, but I remember Splish Splash being a really big thing once a summer. That was a one-time a summer visit.
All the way out to Montauk.
Right. Very far.
And Mark knew that, right? And I gotta say, Lake Compounds, I have a lot of favorites, and I don't want to single any one attraction out, but Lake Compounds is a special little gem.
It is a very pretty park.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites. It's the one I would love to go visit with my family and spend many days. So, hey, Grant, you actually have, well, let's save the two-parter for a bit. I think there's another follow-up question you had mentioned. Grant, what's been going on? Tell us a little bit about Palace and how things are going. You've got a lot of attractions. You can see them here. Matthew's got a bunch of questions you want to ask you as well, but can you just give us an update of how things are going, being somebody that has to work with so many parks and so many regions?
So it's definitely been a challenge. I think, like for most people, 2020 has been an interesting year. For us, it hasn't been too crazy. I mean, at the beginning, when we were trying to figure out what our operation was going to look like, how we were going to structure the guests coming in, how we were going to structure the ticketing system, all that stuff was a lot to manage all at once. But what we ended up doing, especially with all the different regions and all the different restrictions where we operate our parks, we ended up doing is just coming up with an overarching plan that took the most stringent restrictions that we had and then multiplied it out to make it even more restrictive. So we said, here's what the state or local government's telling us that we need to do, and we took it a couple of steps further and then applied that to all of our parks. So just like Felicia was saying, how the Mob Museum was requiring masks before anyone in Las Vegas was, we were doing that too in a lot of our states that weren't requiring masks at the time. So Wisconsin was a big one. We were the only attraction in our area that was requiring masks to be worn. Eventually the state mandated a mask mandate as well, but it wasn't until late July, early August that came about. So we had some difficulties with that, getting guests to buy into it. You always have folks that don't want to wear a mask for one reason or another, or maybe can't wear a mask, or have some restrictions along those lines. So just like Felicia was saying with the Mob Museum, it was about educating the guests. So that was one of our big things too, just making sure that they understand what to expect up front, and then continually educating them. I always, I'm an operator at heart and from the beginning, so I always, think about it from the standpoint of the guests check their brain at the door. As soon as they come to the park, no matter what you tell them or how rational of a person they are, they completely forget everything at the door, and they're just kind of out to enjoy the day and have fun. So they don't think about things. They don't think about putting their mask back on if they took it off to take a drink of water or eat something. So it's always about that continual education too. So we put out a lot of signage explaining the masks and just reminding people to put on their masks. We did the social distancing squares too, although I have to say the mob museums were much more creative than ours. So we did it as well. We put them all over our parks. So it was a pretty big operation to get it done. And like I said before, it was all in such a truncated amount of time because we didn't know what facilities we were going to be able to open and how we were going to be able to open them until basically the last minute. So it was a lot of, they didn't know before you go, the tips and stuff that came up. So there's a lot of information that we wanted to constantly put out there and just let the guests know, hey, this is what to expect. We're going to be taking your temperature before you come into the facility. We're going to require you to have a mask. We put hand sanitizing stations all over the parks, which for any of you guys out there that have bought hand sanitizer in bulk, I have, my Purell at my desk, but you get it. It's always interesting. Some of the parks have very interesting flavors of hand sanitizer. So that was kind of an interesting learning curve for us as well. That we didn't realize that different manufacturers would have different scents. Actually, the one at one of our parks, it smells like whiskey.
Hey,
that's what ours smells like. So if you need more,
one that smells like tequila too. So it's.
I gotta say, speaking of smelling like whiskey, that's a good time to mention that. You could get moonshine. Does it smell like moonshine from the Mob Museum?
It smells very nice. It smells lovely, and we can put your logo on it. So for everybody that's in here, if you need hand sanitizer, call me.
Well, I love that, and that's a good shout out because I want to circle back on that. And by the way, whiskey smells lovely too, so it's perfect. Whiskey smelling hand sanitizer sounds like a dream. But that's another cool thing is that there's some donation requests here, and you guys did a great job at the Mob Museum. So I just want to make sure I circle back on that. But yeah, Grant, you're right about the experience. Like when you are visiting an attraction, I went to an attraction this last weekend, and it is interesting. There's like one of them, I was like, this smells different, right? And I went to another place, and it was like more of like a sticky type of a sanitizer, so it had a different feel. So I mean, those are things that I guess you want to consider. Is Palace purposely sourcing different scents, or is it just happening based on the sourcing?
It just happened based on the sourcing. So it's I've still been traveling a little bit with everything, so I could tell you what park is which. You can give me the scent, and I'll tell you what the park it is. But it's kind of those things. I think so many people started purchasing, or so many companies started purchasing hand sanitizer that the suppliers just kind of grabbed whatever they could. Some of it smells like whiskey, some of it smells like normal sanitizer. So it's a surprise. But yeah, it was definitely one of those things that you just never expect. 9 months ago, you would have never expected to be able to smell hand sanitizer and say, oh, it smells differently depending on where you're at, but it really does. Glad we're not the only ones that have whiskey hand sanitizer, Felicia. You put it on, you're like,
selling point. It's a selling feature. Okay.
The first time I used it, I was like, no one's gonna believe I wasn't drinking. Like, I just reek of alcohol right now.
So Grant, I think one of the things that you had brought up earlier when we were talking was kind of the shift in how you did reservations, right? You started off very restrictive. Are there still areas where you are running reservations for any of the parks, or has it kind of been faded away for all of them?
So it's still, it's a little bit more on the back burner, but we're doing time ticketing. So all of our parks, you have to buy a ticket for that particular day. So that kind of takes care of 70% of the people coming in. So we do have those restrictions in place. Some of the areas are a little bit more restrictive. I know I mentioned Australia. So our park is outside of Sydney, and New South Wales, or the state that they're in, still has a lot of restrictions. It's not as much as down by Melbourne. If you like Victoria, that state is in a very restrictive state. But where we're at, it's they're limiting our capacity to about 500 people out of a park that's capacity is 20 times that. So it's really it really forces us to go into the time taking and be very restrictive on that particular front. So in that case, we are actually doing 2 sessions. So we're doing a morning session and then an evening session with a gap in between, so the park staff can go ahead and sanitize and clean everything that they need to clean up. So that's a little different from us. So instead of buying an all-day ticket, you have your morning session and afternoon session, and we have the ability. We built it in so if the afternoon session is not selling out and guests want to spend the entire day, I mean they do have to leave and come back in, but you can upgrade for I think it's $10 or whatever to go for the entire day. So, but we've reduced the restrictions on a lot of our capacity management for season pass holders, which I mentioned before, just because we discovered that it wasn't really working how we wanted it to work, or how we thought it was going to work. So we made some revisions to that. But what stayed the same is, the capacity of the parks has stayed the same, but the time ticketing has been a little bit more flexible in that sense. So when we first started, it was, if you buy a ticket for Wednesday, you're not coming Thursday. But now it's, if you buy it for Wednesday, we can exchange it and let you come in on Thursday, as long as the capacity is not through the roof. And I think a lot of attractions have seen that too. We set our capacity limits. We never really hit that ceiling. I mean, maybe on a weekend we get really, really close. So that's when things get a little bit more restrictive. But, a random Wednesday or Thursday, the parks aren't as busy. So they're a little bit more flexible with that.
Grant, can I ask you, the guests that are coming to the park, has the demographic changed? Is it were you getting some kind of out of towners before, and now it's just 100% local? What any thoughts on?
Yeah, so we were getting a lot more out of town folks. So places like a destination location like Wisconsin Dells, we're still seeing a lot of out of town folks come in. But you have Kennywood up there right now. We're seeing a lot more people just from the area that are doing staycations. We also lowered our pricing. We had some 50% off tickets as well, so that helped to bring a lot of people in. So we saw a lot more locals come in to those parks than we typically would see. The ones that are a little more regional, you still see the people from a little bit outside the area, but not as far as you normally would. So my office is at Idlewild. We're in the middle of nowhere, so you kind of have to want to get here. And we used to see folks come up from Virginia and Maryland, especially with younger kids, to visit Daniel Tiger. But we've seen less and less of that, and more local folks come in, and season pass holders as well. So it just depends on depends on the park in the particular area. But we definitely have seen less people from outside. Let's say a 50-mile radius. When before, we might say, we're maybe a 150-mile radius we'll see guests come in from, but now it's definitely a lot smaller than what we've seen before in the past.
Yeah, in the Orlando market, we're seeing a lot of offers geared towards locals at a time that you normally wouldn't expect some of the big parks to do that. Felicia, I meant to ask you as well when we were chatting, the folks that are coming to the Mob Museum, is it a different person than it was before?
A little bit. So we used to have a lot of international visitors. That's not happening right now. We are getting a lot of locals and getting a lot of the drive market. Interestingly, flights keep picking up over here. So we are getting more individuals coming from further and further away, but it is a little bit, a lot of it less international than it used to be. We have audio tours in 7 languages, and those are not selling.
Got it. I want to point out, Ross, in the question and answer, brought up that they're seeing a change in the time of day that their visitors arrive. They used to, normally kind of spread themselves out throughout the day. Now they happen to be arriving in the last hour they're open. Grant, or have you seen kind of a change in the arrival pattern? I would assume your park in Australia will have a much unique one if it's going to kind of have 2 operating days in a given day. But in any of the existing parks, have you seen any changes there?
Not so much for the people who are just buying day tickets. Season pass holders are probably the big ones. I mean, they're always the wild card. But we usually, it depends on the region. Some parks will pick on Idlewild. So there's a lot of season pass holders that come in the evening after work, or they'll bring their kids after the work just to enjoy the park for a little bit. We haven't seen too much of a shift in it in terms of when people show up. But I would say the season pass holders tend to show up a little bit later now, because they know that all the people who are buying tickets are going to show up first, because they do have to wait in line to get their temperature checked and everything. So they do show up slightly later, but it's maybe an hour. When the rush normally was at 11, now they might show up at 12.
Got it. And since you're talking about your season pass holders, I'd love to kind of just understand, what are some of the things that you've done with them? I know, the kind of the product promise changed this year in that we weren't opening when we thought we were opening. We're not operating as long as we're operating. So kind of how have y'all dealt with that?
So that's a good question. So, originally when everything started, we thought, okay, we're going to be able to open by June 1st. And then, that kept getting pushed back depending on the state and the local authority. So what originally we ended up doing is we said, hey, you know what, we'll extend your season pass through next year to the day that we open. So basically you get, if we said we were going to open on May 1st and we didn't open until June 1st, and next year we're planning on opening May 1st, your pass is going to be good all the way to June 1st. Of that year. So we ended up changing it a little bit for various parks, but all of our season pass holders now have privileges in the 2020 season. Whether it's full privileges or not depends on the passes that they've had. For our parks that didn't open at all, obviously, those passes are being turned into 21 passes, and they have their full passes. For the folks who've been at the parks, been able to enjoy them, they are really dependent on their pass level. We have multiple pass levels, but it's also dependent on when that particular park opened. So if the park's, extremely busy and, pass holders were really restricted, then we'll let them go for the entire season. But it just really depends on the market. And I think when our original plan came up, we thought that the reservation system was going to be much more heavily utilized by the season pass holders. And then when we took that away, we realized that the season pass holders kind of come and go as they please anyways. So that's basically what we're ending up doing, is just extending the season passes into the 2020 season. For most of our season pass holders, it will be for the entire summer season. For some of them, it will be for the fall season. We made the decision a couple of weeks ago to cancel our fall and winter seasons at the parks. So those folks who bought passes and expected to be able to come then, we're going to allow them to come next year in that as well. So it's kind of moved the expiration date of their passes around depending on the park and depending on the particular situation. But as a general thing, we rolled over all of our season pass holders to 2021.
Yeah, Grant, thanks for that information. And I do want to say it's interesting to hear, how you guys have operated within the rules that you could operate in. So Castle Park being in California, but outdoor golf, miniature golf is allowed. So it does seem like you guys have been able to kind of like work within the constraints pretty well of what those local governments were allowing.
Yeah, so Castle Park is an interesting case, because they do have the miniature golf area, which is allowed to be operating. They have an indoor arcade, which is not. And then they have the theme park, which we haven't opened, and they're opened 365 or all year round. So their season pass holders are in a completely different setup. So what we ended up doing with them is we took the number of days that they're closed and added that onto everyone's pass. So if your pass expired June 1st and the park didn't open until June 15th, or it was supposed to open June 1st, we closed June 1st and your pass expired on the 15th, we gave you 15 extra days on top of your existing pass. So we kind of rolled everyone forward in a big rolling motion. Now they're still closed because of the restrictions out there. So that's what we'll end up doing. We moved it. They were supposed to be able to open in July, I think like July 20th or something. So we adjusted everyone's passes, and now we're getting ready to adjust everyone's passes again for when we believe they can open in October.
Well, I think that's the battle there, is like the constant, changing of what are you going to offer. So it obviously it's a difficult time to kind of try to go back and work with those customers. I do want to, I as a parent, I love this, by the way. I just want to say a little shout out. I thought this was really cute. I struggle with this with my kids right now on their digital learning at home, and they fortunately just went back to school. If you guys are wondering why it's so quiet and no one's interrupted me, it's because everyone's at school here in our part of Tennessee. But this was just a fun little way to encourage some families to do some family sharing and then bring, win a free or get a free round of miniature golf. I thought that was cool. So, well, I'm looking at the clock. I'm trying to see if we have any other questions come in. I do actually, Kelly. Hi, Kelly. Kelly's from Gateway. She's a former director of visitor experience at World War II Museum. Kelly, you had a question for our panelists. I wanted to give you an opportunity real quick to share or ask.
Oh, I did. Hi, Grant. Dave, how are you?
How are you?
I'm well. Okay, well, let's move on. So I actually, I did have a question, and it was really more, it was coming back to when you guys were talking about staffing. And my question was, I've heard from a lot of my customers that that people who aren't normally operations folks are on the operations side. I know, Felicia, you talked about that a little bit, where people are filling in. And what it reminded me of is years ago, many years ago, I worked at Disney, and managers used to have to go do, we had to go do crowd control and stuff every once in a while and work Main Street just so that we would know what it was like. So I was wondering, if you are doing that, is that helping? And is aside, maybe some of that staff is able to understand what that operations team is facing, and if there are some positives that really come from that, where you kind of had to institute a program that was once innovative and just kind of a one-off type of thing.
Short answer is yes and yes. It's something that we've tried to have, we've implemented a long time ago, and we try to do it regularly, is have folks from the administrative offices come out and be in the museum and be around guests and understand the experience. And coming from Four Seasons, similar to Disney, same thing. There was always like a crunch time when it was just understood that folks in different departments, like your stewarding department, might be out parking cars for valet, like just happened. But I think it's important to keep your eye on your base experience and understand what your guests are experiencing. You know, as Matt talked about earlier, you know, would you put information about other things online, like your COVID safety procedures? I think it helps put your staff members in the guest shoes and understand what the guest experience looks like and what questions they might have.
And you know, that's just the same thing with us too. I mean, I've always been a huge proponent of getting out there and doing what the team members are doing, because I think you get a better perspective and a better understanding. You know, even with what I do now, you know, when I go to a park, I'll take tickets. I'll sell tickets with the people. I'll get behind a register. I'll get in line to see what the experience is, so we can kind of make better decisions. And I think that's one of the positives that have come out of this, because we have been short staffed and we have a lot of people who are doing different roles than they normally would do. They see it from a different perspective. You know, group sales at a lot of our parks are down, so the group sales staff has been out in the park working or taking tickets or being at the front gate, and then they kind of understand the pain points of some of those other departments. They're like, oh, you know what? Now I understand why when we ask you to do X, Y, and Z, why you guys are like, oh, you kind of push back a little bit, because we understand how much of a disruption this is to your daily occurrence. So I think it is, and we've definitely seen a lot more of our staff. You know, when it's crunch time, a lot of people are out of the office doing stuff in the parks. But I think this year in particular, we've seen a lot more of that, where you're out there interacting with the guests more and experiencing what it's like to be on the park side. Because I think sometimes when you get to a certain level, you kind of forget about the decisions you make and how your interactions affect everyone else down the line. So you make up a policy for, you know, sanitizing a ride, and it looks good on paper, and then you actually see it in practice and you're out there doing it, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, I did not think this through correctly. So we've got a lot of those experiences as well, which I think are invaluable for the operation to be able to see how things actually function in the real world.
Well, plus it gives validation to that staff that you're trying to keep. You talked a lot about keeping their morale up and keeping them happy, right? So that's a great validating thing, to have management come in and be able to say, you know, well, this is hard. And sometimes that's all they want, is the recognition that this is harder than it looks. And we're not just whining, you know, this is actually difficult. So, I mean, I thought of it as kind of an interesting side positive, right? I mean, we have so much stuff that's negative and that's challenging, but there are positives that can come out of this change in kind of the shift in our perspective.
And the team members get a kick out of it too. It builds morale. You wouldn't think of it, but when I was in operations, you know, during crunch time, I would put on my lifeguard uniform and go up on chair, and the lifeguards thought it was hysterical.
Are there pictures? I'm just curious.
There are, but they have been hidden. So they're in a locked folder somewhere. But, you know, when I was at Lake Compounds a couple of weeks ago, and their interim GM, I was walking through the park to go check on something, and he comes driving by on the train because the train operator needed a break, and that's what he used to do. So, and everyone thought it was hilarious. They're like, there goes Larry driving the train. And it brought a smile to everyone's face. Well, you can really see because they had masks on, but you could tell everyone thought it was funny. So it's those little morale boosters. And it is, I think Kelly hit the nail on the head with it that, it's out of all these negative things and all these challenges that we have to deal with, you have these little moments that are kind of uplifting and let everyone like realize and brings everyone back to the realization that, hey, we're doing this because it's fun. And that's what we want to provide fun to our guests, and we want to have fun with our team members as well. So I think it was a spot on operation.
Cool. Thanks, you guys.
Well, Grant, Felicia, we really want to thank you for sitting down with us, enjoying some coffee, but really just the candid conversation that we were all able to have. I know that I appreciated it, and I think the folks attending did as well. For those folks that are joining us today, we invite you back in 2 weeks' time on Wednesday, September 16th. This will be a special time as well, a little bit. It'll be at 3 p.m. Eastern time. We'll really have a lot of a focus on the zoo and aquarium space. So we invite you to maybe take a break from the AZA virtual show, pop over, and we'll chat a little bit, and then you can return back to the AZA show. So thank you for attending. Feel free to email us at marketing@gatewayticketing.com if you want to be on our mailing list, or just drop by gatewayticketing.com/community to see other ways that you can stay in touch. And again, thanks, Grant, Felicia, Kelly, thanks for joining us. Randy, excellent job. And Bill for keeping the ship going. We'll see y'all soon.
See you guys.
Everybody, see you later. Bye.